Patrick Johnston will be busy that day as well, covering the Vancouver Canucks for the province. He chronicles history too, and will be doing so tomorrow with the NHL Draft's first round. How are you?
It's all history, Matt. It's all
That's what we do. First draft of history, right?
Yes, and some for better or worse.
Right.
That was a nervous giggle. That was a nervous giggle about this.
These Vancouver Canucks.
I want to start with an apology because, sometimes we get heated in this segment. And the one thing I love about Patrick is he loves to roll with the punches and throw some back. So we had a good row last week on tax-free jurisdictions, LTO.
Oh, yeah.
I had a regular list to say, ooh, you really went at Patrick. And so that's sort of my cue to go, okay, maybe.
Oh, really? I was fine.
Yeah. Okay.
It's fine. But, I'll just say it again. My buddy James from the Pucknuts, he's a huge fan of that segment. It's his main item. And he was very pleased to hear us discussing all his research.
Oh, good. And of course, you're always harder on the people you're closest with, right? And
yes.
So what it speaks to is that we're a big happy family. Safe space, Patrick. Yeah. Love it.
To be clear, to dedicated listeners out there, I was not offended by anything Matt said. That is how it works. This is what we do.
Sometimes, I get fiery. I mean, not
you. No.
Yeah.
Enough of us. Let's move on to the fire that was acquired by the Vancouver Canucks, because he does have a lot of fire amongst a bunch of other things. That's one of the bags he carries. What do you think of this acquisition for Vancouver?
Well, I mean, there's, obviously, in the end, you have to dress a hockey lineup. And, Matthew brought this one up. Was it last week?
We're going to clip that. We're going to clip that. Patrick Johnston says they have to dress a lineup. Glowing phrase. Glowing phrase.
And listen, Matthew pointed out, the guy, scored 20 whatever goals last year. As someone said to me, what did you think of his season this year? I said, well, he didn't play. I said, well, exactly.
Yeah.
He was listen, he can still, it is clear he can still put the puck in the net, and that does matter to a degree. But as I said last week, there's enough for me about how he just didn't have the wheels to play in a top role with the Oilers. When Hyman went out, they had to lean on Kane, and that was a problem. And he took penalty after penalty. And we know this is a guy that has always done things his own way, is the kind way to put it, but has gotten into a lot of trouble over the years, is the true way to put it. And there's a lot of reasons why he has been a questionable figure for teams to add. When you go back, it was amazing doing all the research, going through. As Lachlan Irvine put it to a bunch of us, this is a player that has an entire Wikipedia section titled "Legal Issues and Controversies," right? Like let us not forget that the tracksuit in the shower happened here because he went home to get his car, and he was in his tracksuit because he thought the meeting was at the hotel. He was a young man. Young men made poor choices, but he went to Buffalo and made further poor choices, and had a settled lawsuit against a young woman who alleged he assaulted her. And there was
the COVID stuff.
He missed, guys.
Oh,
he
yeah,
missed.
lots.
He missed a practice to attend the NBA All-Star game.
Yes.
The COVID stuff, listen, I am, as Patrick O'Bean said, I am perfectly prepared to give people second chances and believe they can grow up. And the fact that he seems to be a doting father is to his credit, and I think does matter. But nonetheless, there has been all this chaos around him his entire career.
A lot of noise.
Poor choices. So, listen, is he probably going to put the puck in the net? Yes, he probably is going to put the puck in the net. But there's just, it comes back to that, we know the Canucks are going to struggle to acquire players this summer. You talk to people around the league, and this is far from a choice destination now. It's not just that you're twisting people's arm. People don't want to come here. And so you're having to trade for guys. And if this is the guys that are available for trade, here you are. So, listen, I hope I'm wrong. I always hope I'm wrong when I'm negative. And this turns out to be a grand slam, great signing, great pickup, I should say.
Mm-hmm.
Just there's not a lot of evidence it will be.
He's clearly a nonconformist, and the NHL and its requirement for conformity. He's playing for a final NHL contract at 34 years old in his hometown. I think he's got a lot of motivation to bring his best on and off the ice. But after the answer you just gave, does this smack of desperation? Are the Canucks desperate?
I mean, yeah. I really, this is like I said, they have to put a lineup together. They have to find guys that can play, and there's elements of what else are we going to find? They lose out on Matt Duchene, and we know that they were very keen on that. They're obviously still interested in Marco Rossi, but if that was a trade that Minnesota wanted to make, that would have been made, right? Whatever the Canucks have offered, it would have been made by now, right?
I don't necessarily agree because I think, and Russo reported again today, I think Guerin is holding out.
Sure.
For a roster player, he said today goals, so either center or wing, so it's already moved a little bit, right? Yeah. Winger now is. But I think there might be a world where at the end of the day, Bill Guerin has to settle for feet.
Yeah, it's possible.
And I wonder if the Canucks are waiting him out.
Yeah, it's entirely possible. It's entirely possible.
Also, Bill Guerin's also getting really bad reviews on the player in that they offered, new reporting now is also saying they offered Rossi for Peterka as the start of a package from Minnesota. Right. And Buffalo said no to that. Right. So Buffalo's saying no.
Yes.
Yeah.
Our winger for your center, no.
And it's not like Peterka went for exorbitant cost either.
No,
right.
That was interesting.
So the more recent evidence.
That was definitely interesting, for sure. Yeah, I don't. The Canucks are in a spot and much of their own creation, right? The moment that the things blew up, and I don't know I don't think this was their fault, but the moment things blew up with JT Miller, they were taken on a course they did not plan to be on, right? And so since then they've been forced to pivot, and they've not done very well at that. They continue to need a replacement for JT Miller, or to fill the minutes anyway. They're not going to find the player, but to fill the minutes. The Kane sort of physical element clearly is an attempt to recreate some of that, what Miller brought to the plate. But Miller, Miller took faceoffs and played center and was a great passer, and wasn't necessarily always the best defensive player, but he brought energy and passion, and he was a very underrated skater, I always thought, right? Replacing that was going to be difficult to begin with. So Kane, there's a physical element, a put the puck in the net element, but it also, I found myself thinking a lot about when the Benning era, when they brought in Michael Furland. It was a little bit of a trying to recapture some past glory with a guy that probably wasn't going to be able to do it. You knew right out of the box, and
at least with less term here in this.
Yeah,
case.
I mean, there's way less risk here, obviously, in terms of that. But yeah, they need to find that. They need to find guys, and they would like to find guys that they actually are keen on. And I mean, Edmonton had to get rid of a player, and they said, well, sure, we'll do that, we'll help you out, and we'll, essentially it's a Podkolzin for Kane trade. And I think a lot about that. I mean, how would you feel last fall if this had been a Podkolzin for Kane trade? And I would have been, well, I understand why they're moving on from Vasily Podkolzin. Is Evander Kane the bet I'm going to make? I'm not really sure. I'm in those terms, I remain ambivalent. I don't hate it, but I'm still have all the things that come with him and all the questions that come with him. And if he has settled down and focused on hockey, great. That'll be to the Canucks' benefit. It's hard to imagine after all these years of all this stuff that he is a tiger with new stripes.
Let me ask you a question we haven't asked. We haven't even brooded on ourselves lately. And we asked it a lot at the time. But now with the hindsight of the last few months, is the Canuck roster in better shape right now if at the end of January they had traded Elias Pettersson instead of JT Miller. The return that they would have got in January, are they in better shape right now looking to plug fewer holes to plug, more certainty, do you think? What do you think?
Well, I mean, does Pettersson bring you back a defenseman like Marcus Pettersson? Like, I guess that's one of your questions, right? Like, what is he actually...
for sure.
I think so. Yeah. I think,
and a better center than Hedl.
So much of your question, though, Blake, is so much of your question pivots on the health of Filip Hedl, though. You know, like, because there's a world where you could consider Hedl a 0 right now because of murky.
But we knew Hedl's reputation when he was acquired.
No, I understand, but he suffered another concussion as a Canuck, which dramatically.
It's tough because at least even though Patterson was a complete non-entity on offense, he still was a decent defensive player, right? Miller was putting points up, but he was a disaster defensively. Mm-hmm. So to me, it's two sides of the coin. Like, it's just one way or another. They had to dig them.
Maybe nominal difference is the answer. It's a nominal difference.
But I think fundamentally your problem remains the same, which is that you constructed your team to function one way. It ceased to function because both those parts were not playing well. Were not working the way they were intended to work, and one of them had to leave. And they've been trying to dig themselves out of that ever since, and they have not done very well. I mean, it's still shocking to me that even though they did not have the sort of multi-layered structure that they were hoping to have in moving off Besser and turning around and whatever first-round pick they got out of such a Besser trade, turning around and turning it into something else. The fact that there was something on the table that they still said no, even at that late moment, and they're just simply going to let him walk. Like, it's so strange to me in the end. Mm-hmm. And so they're having to do extra work because of that. Like, that they have not done a good job under pressure. And I mean, they are going to have to keep working hard. I mean, Patrick Allvin admitted, I'm probably going to look to move my trade back. He did admit that, right? Of course he has to, because they need a center. But I don't know if it's going to do it. I just don't know if it's going to happen.
I'm sorry, I'm laughing. They're going to continue to have to work hard. Did anybody see that Stephen A. Bob Myers exchange at the NBA draft last night, where the ex-GM Bob Myers was explaining how hard it is to do some of the things around the draft with trades and whatnot, and Stephen A. just looked him down. Of course it's hard. It's supposed to be hard. People don't want to hear that it's hard. That's the job. There's 30 of these in the world. You're good enough to rise to one of them. Then you've got to be good at dealing with hard. Embrace
what did you think
hard.
was going to be? What exactly did you think this...
Solve the hard. That is what the job is.
That's the biggest problem, is that you see other GMs doing the job.
Exactly.
That's the problem.
Exactly. Right. So let me ask you the Whistler Golf Club poll question before we get off of Evander Kane. Do you see Evander Kane helping Elias Pettersson's bounce back?
I knew this question was coming, and I've been thinking about this question since it happened. Is there a fit? Between Elias Pettersson.
Can you make that argument? Yeah.
No, because I think Pettersson needs a guy on his wing who is fast, and he is not fast. I think this is.
He's not slow though.
I don't think he's as.
Listen, Matt, not fast.
The J Fresh hockey card has him at a 67% skating speed. That's in the Blues. That's not the Reds, which is the
okay. But I mean, this is a guy though. But let's be clear.
He's 34 and big. 34, Patrick. It's like,
and he's 34, and he had surgery on 5 different things last September. You know, He was fine in the playoffs. He scored 6 goals. But like I said, you moved him up the lineup, he started to struggle. And it was the same thing last year. I know he was injured last year against the Canucks, right? We know he wasn't 100%. But when he gets in the offensive zone, we did see elements of him being able to do stuff. He can still, Patrick Allvin is not wrong. He still makes a difference on the boards. That's absolutely the case. I just think Elias Pettersson needs someone with a little more jump on his wing.
You said that,
if you make me do an up-down choice, I'm saying no.
When you said Evander Kane couldn't keep up with the Oilers, good news. He won't have to keep up with the Oilers. He only has to keep up with the Canucks, and that's a different gear than what they don't. The Canucks don't own that gear that the Oilers have.
Unfortunately, not. I mean, funny thing is, like, Elias Pettersson used to be fast. Maybe he'll be fast again, and this will be immaterial. But
yeah, a lot hinges on that.
I mean, everything hinges on that. That is the story. No matter which guys they put in the lineup, everything is on what Elias Pettersson does next year.
Very rarely is they will stick at their pick and make a selection a hot take.
Yeah.
And yet Cam Robinson offered that to us yesterday, and it's kind of a hot take.
It's a hot take. They'll use a draft pick.
Their allotted choice will be
their
used
best one
for the purpose of selecting a player.
Their allotted and best draft pick will be used.
When I asked Alvin, I said, "Do you expect to pick at 15?" He said, "Well, I haven't had a lot of talks about moving up, but I have had some talks about moving back." I think Cam's right. If you want a probability chart of what is most likely to happen, it is most likely they will pick at 15.
Hard to believe.
But it's hard to believe. They shouldn't, but they probably will. Because of all the reasons we described. Like, it is hard to make trades. But again, that's the job. But they've just seemed gun shy on stuff this last 6 months.
Well, I think it's coming down to brass tacks and basically who's more desperate. Bill Guerin to get Marco Rossi off his team and willing to accept that 15th overall and a player from the Canucks, or the Canucks getting so desperate that they add to 15th overall and a player for Rossi, or use 15th overall for another player somewhere out there. I talked to the answer we're waiting for over the last.
Yeah, and I talked to a couple of people on the weekend, and I wrote about this, and I said, "Listen, what do you think is affecting the idea of a trade?" And they said, "Well, because and I think Cam was one of the people. 8 to 14 is a bit of a roll of the dice on how it's going to play out, and so it is entirely possible that what the Canucks have is a couple different options based on who's available at 15." That the other teams are a bit like Bill Guerin is kind of saying, "Oh, okay, well, let's see what I can get out of here." And as you get closer to the draft, the pressure points raise and blah blah blah. And so it's entirely possible that Alvin is sitting on a deal that, if whoever's available there is going to be the guy that his potential suitor 5, 6, 7 picks behind him wants, and then they go somewhere. But does that extract to a second line center? The desire to move up in a not terribly interesting but not terribly exciting draft, to move up 7 spots or whatever. I do not know who's picking 22 off the top of my head, so do not pretend there's a deal in the works there. But I'm just, as an example, I don't think a second line center gets you that far.
If Dakota Joshua had replicated his tournament or his season and had an 18-goal, 40-point in 80-game season, which is actually less than what he did the previous year, because he was 32 points in just 63 games and 18 goals. But if he had basically backed it up, would 15th and Dakota Joshua be tempting enough, do you think, for Bill Guerin?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and the idea of Dakota Joshua as a trade chip, I don't think is crazy. Even though he had a poor season. I mean, he was certainly better in the finish, and I think hopefully people, he hit cancer, and then he had a hip problem, and he just took him forever to get going. And I will go back to how badly he felt about his season when I talked to him about his Masterton nomination. I think I told you guys he basically started crying. He was very thankful for the recognition from us, the PHWA chapter, and that we recognized what he'd been through, and that we wanted to salute him for it, essentially. And he was just, he was devastated because the team wanted to be better. He played terribly. He had not played very well at all, and he'd been signed to help them be the team that they believed they were supposed to be. So
people also forget he was good in the playoffs last year. 4 goals, 4 assists in 13 games is not bad. That's a pretty good pace for his deployment. If Bill Guerin looks at that, you'd think that'd be kind of tempting too, but got to believe he can bounce back. That's the problem.
But I mean, the funny thing is, if you believe he's that player, then you're bringing in Marco Rossi, who is not Dakota Joshua, right?
Nope.
Right? I do kind of think. I mean, imagine let's talk about what Kane does well. Him and Joshua as a wing pair with whoever, that potentially is a lot of fun. That's a lot of heavy work on the boards. That's a lot of forechecking. That's some good hands around the net. There's something there if it works. But again, it's all on whether Kane can keep going the whole season.
You were struck by the goaltending answer Alvin gave yesterday?
Yeah, I mean, listen, he was asked, I mean, it was two parts, I guess, I asked him about Demko and his expectation. Basically made it clear, yeah, we would like to talk to him about an extension. And then was asked about Archer Shelovs by Janar, about basically, does this change? And he certainly didn't shy away from the idea, or he answered it in a way that made me immediately think, okay, they know that Shelovs probably has some value. An MVP performance does mean something, even if this is the number 3 goalie, right? These kinds of goalies don't usually go for a lot, but there's something there. I think they certainly are hopeful, and you see guys get flipped around. Guys of this kind of type get flipped around.
Maybe Edmonton will give them a 4th-round pick. The 4th-round pick.
Just back and forth.
Exactly.
By the way, it's Ottawa's 4th-round pick. Remember that.
Yes.
Originally with Ottawa. But back and forth. There you go.
It's been dosed.
So then it becomes, so then you're saying, so Shelovs and Podkolzin for Kane and a 4th. How do you feel about that?
Mm-hmm. Or is it a 4th, though?
Is it actually a 1st?
It was your 4th. You sent it to me. Okay. Yeah. Anyways.
You should want more than a 4th for Shelovs, though, no?
But the reality is... But
goaltenders who are waiver out... Yeah.
No.
There are goaltenders... I take my cues from Woodley in Goal Media. There are goaltenders of this ilk and better that pass through waivers every September when rosters are being set.
Yeah, so you're hoping for someone that's like, we really think this is a guy that could contribute, and we want to do it right now.
Mm-hmm.
But you while that is true, that goalies of that ilk do pass through, I don't think that's a game plan.
No,
going into camp saying that's what we're going to do.
No,
and just lose them.
You also have scenarios in training camp where goaltenders come in with injuries or get hurt in preseason, or we saw that here last year.
There was. Once we started realizing it wasn't always signing Lankin wasn't just about Demko in the end. Mm-hmm. It was a realization to a degree that we do need to go with a 3-headed monster. I think a 3-headed monster is quite likely here next year.
Yeah, and possibly you put a goalie on injured reserve to start the season.
Oh, little Nick
to protect the asset.
Mm-hmm.
That is, by the way, that is the fun one.
The team's going to exploit LTIR into the playoffs. Why not exploit it on the front end, especially when it's going away in the CBA? Or
I guess there is the reporting there. Yeah, that's that the whole Kane situation really is the tipping point. It sounds like so.
Yep. Anything else, sir? Did we cover it all? Do you have a hot take for us? Did I do great? We didn't even get spicy today. I almost feel like something's missing here. Let me see. Do you care what a player wears or drives to the game, Patrick?
No. Well,
I don't think anybody in their right mind does. Lou Lamoriello, but he's gone too.
I'm on the record as being very pro, guys. Like, let's have some fun about what you wear to the ring.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Do you want to see the entrances like you see now in the NBA and the WNBA that turn into the fashion show and what's their fit today?
Yeah, absolutely. They basically those photos happen anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem, of course, with the Canucks now is a lot of times they don't come in the old Gate 9 way, right? Like if they come in early enough, they're coming up through the president's suite because that way they're right at the dressing room.
Yeah. So. Reminds me of a story. The late Ray Emery, when he was goaltending for the Ottawa Senators, had a guy in town car guy in town, and started showing up to the rink in like an orange Lamborghini or something like that, like a really audacious, loud Lamborghini. And like day after day, a different media member would say like, "Hey, Ray, I saw the car you were driving here. I saw the car." And one day, another guy asked, "Hey, say, Ray, how about that car you're driving?" And a teammate looked at him and said, "Boy, Ray, you're certainly getting a lot of comments about that car you drive in to the rink every day." And he looked at me and went, hockey.
Yep.
You're standing out. You're a tall poppy. We can't have this. Hockey. Okay, buddy.
Yeah.
Good hit. even if we didn't fight, there's always next week.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, guys.
Enjoy your draft and free agency.
Thank you, sir. See ya.